And we're live. We're live, guys. Welcome to another episode of Good Morning Liberty. It is Monday morning. Happy Monday to you. I hope you had a great weekend. It's Monday, September the 17th. We're broadcasting live from here on the West Coast in downtown Los Angeles. 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. So good morning to you. Good afternoon. Good evening, wherever you may be watching. I really appreciate you being here with me. Hi to Aviator Tom out in the chat. Thank you so much for being here. I had a pretty busy, very productive weekend. And of course, today is Constitution Day. So we're definitely going to talk about that today. This is a big deal. So, of course, I want to remind you, smash the likes. Hit that like button. If you support this show, you want us to keep doing it, and you want to help us spread the word, smash that like button. Hit subscribe and get notifications on YouTube or wherever you may be watching this video so you can get updates, and that helps us let you know when we're going to be doing broadcasts. We're usually here Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 9:30 a.m. Pacific time, and then we do some other videos throughout the week as well. But today, let's get right to it. I do want to talk about Constitution Day. As you can see in the title of the video, I asked the question, is Constitution Day a scam? Well, let me give you the answer right off the bat. Absolutely. But let's get right to it. I wrote an article that we're sending out as an email. I don't like to really cover my own blogs, but this is basically covering my perspective here at the 10th Amendment Center on what I think is going on with Constitution Day. And it's not that awesome, to be honest with you. So first of all, September 17th. Why is this Constitution Day? First of all, let's go back 231 years ago, 1787. This is the date that the delegates in the Constitutional Convention, this was their last day together. They met, they signed the document. They were all done with their work from the long, hot summer. But today wasn't always celebrated as Constitution Day. And in fact, this is a more modern incarnation. They called it Citizenship Day for a while. It really didn't start getting steam until the 1940s and 1950s. Good morning, Liberty. Hi to Justin. Good to see you here. Thanks for being here with us over in the chat. So, Constitution Day didn't really get going until more recently. In fact, it was 2004 that Public Law 108-447, which is currently codified in law at 36 U.S.C. 106. It didn't start out as a civic education bill. It was actually an appropriations bill. So this thing that was passed in late 2014 went into effect in 2015, a large appropriation bill that had massive funding and subsidies for things like the FDA, agricultural programs, state and local law enforcement assistance, departments of energy, the Exim Bank, guaranteed loan programs, military funding for Egypt, Israel, Jordan, Sudan, Guatemala, Haiti, and Uganda, the World Bank, federal unemployment programs, the Department of Education, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and much more. And they included a mandate that any school getting federal funding must set aside September 17th to teach about the Constitution. It was kind of tucked away. It really wasn't a major part of that bill. In fact, a majority of that bill was to do the military funding, the police funding, Department of Education, HUD, all this other garbage that's a violation of the Constitution. So think about this for a moment. Federal politicians, and this is how I put it in my article this morning, federal politicians who are taking billions upon billions of dollars from the people to carry out programs not authorized by the Constitution, are unconstitutionally mandating that schools unconstitutionally funded by the unconstitutional Federal Department of Education must teach your kids about constitutional limits on federal power. If that's not some kind of sick joke, I don't know what is. A federal mandate for unconstitutionally federally run and funded schools is going to teach people about the Constitution in and of itself. This is bad. Now, it's not that I'm against the idea of having a remembrance or a celebration of Constitution Day. In fact, I think it's really important. But because it comes through from a federal mandate, of course it's going to be garbage in what they teach. So you can go to just about anywhere. I mean, maybe these days with the internet expanding and more voices getting out there, you can find more information. But a lot of the most popular stuff is just junk. For example, you can go to the mountvernon.org website. Let me pull this up here. mountvernon.org. This is the official estate of George Washington. He was the president of the convention and the first president under the Constitution for the United States. You'd think they'd talk quite a bit about the Constitution, the structure. But no, like most, and this is what they do a lot in the government-run schools too, they teach you Constitution trivia, basically mundane facts. How long is a senator supposed to serve? How old do you have to be president? For example, in the Constitution quiz from George Washington's Mount Vernon, they ask, what role did Washington play in the 1787 convention? Oh, he was the president of the convention. It's good to know. What was the original task? To revise the Articles of Confederation. Interesting. What key issue was not discussed at the Constitutional Convention? Women's rights. Who was thought of as the father of the Constitution? I mean, on and on. There's a little bit of a political narrative, but then it's just basic constitutional trivia. The schools teach you this stuff. How many years does someone serve? What branches of government are there? And on and on and on. And this comes from George Washington's website. This isn't necessarily government run. I'm sure they get some kind of government funding. But they never teach the underlying philosophy. They don't teach about it at all. Now, Dave Benner wrote a really great blog post that we just ran maybe about an hour ago called The Constitution, a League of States Rather Than a National Government. And here's how Dave put it. The Constitution decided upon a league of states rather than a national government settling on a more perfect union. Not a perfect one. They incorporated federalism, and they recognized that all powers not delegated were retained. And I cover this as well. And I like this quote from Dave as well. While the Constitution was signed on this day, it had absolutely no legal effect until ratified. So it was signed by the founders, but it didn't go into effect. That they had a mechanism under Article 7. It called for independent state conventions to determine each state's endorsement. Not state governments, but the people of each state. As such, the Constitution was a compact between the states, so ratifying the same. So this is one of the most important underlying principles. And whether it's George Washington's Mount Vernon or I look at, and I didn't actually look at their Constitution Day post today, but basically many of the founders have foundations or museums or educational resources that are run like a museum, a history center. Thomas Jefferson's Monticello, James Madison's Montpelier, I believe, the estate, John Dickinson. And generally when I look at the Facebook pages, they're very active. They tweet a lot. They post articles and things like that. But most of the time what they're talking about has nothing to do, especially in a climate like today where there's so much debate over the proper role of government. Should so-and-so be doing this or not? Well, most of the debate really is about political nonsense, but there would be so much to say from the founders about this kind of thing. And when I look at the pages of these really venerable founders, you go back and look at them today, and the people who are managing their estates, the museums, the history centers, they don't ever talk about the structure of government, or if they do, it's rare. Generally, if you go to like Thomas Jefferson's Monticello Facebook page. You don't see many quotes from Jefferson, although he was probably the most prolific writer of all the founders. Instead, they talk about gardening. Oh, look at the view from, Jefferson was certainly into horticulture and agriculture, but this was not his primary thing. So you'll see a lot of posts about flowers or how you can come there and have a wedding. Look at the sunset on this day. Oh, we're going to do trick or treat or a reenactment of this debate or whatever it may be. But you rarely hear Jefferson's views about the structure of government, if ever. And same with the Mount Vernon estate. You rarely hear what Washington had to say about a particular issue. They're talking about trick-or-treating coming up. It's really just absurd. So Justin says they teach us our constitutional limitations, not the government limitations. Yeah, I'm going to get that to that in a second. Will Johnson, hello. People in the states created the federal government established in 1781. How about teaching about federalism and the people of states came first? Yes, it is the people of the several states. They created the federal government, not the other way around. But again, Constitution Day, it is a unconstitutional federal mandate to unconstitutional federally funded government-run schools to teach about constitutional limitations. It's mind-boggling to me. Now, it's even worse than the fact, I think, that they're just teaching this Constitution trivia in these government-run schools. I think it's actually worse than that. And yesterday I went to the Constitution Center. I don't even know if it's working because earlier this morning it was not. They have this interactive Constitution that they built. This is like one of the leading places where people are going to get information about the Constitution. If you Google Constitution Day, this is probably going to come up in one of the top 3 searches, and the last time I looked at the studies, the top 3 search results get about 67% of the clicks. People don't scroll down, so whatever Google is determining goes to the top. So constitutioncenter.org is right at the top, and it looks like, thankfully, they're still not loading. But they created this interactive Constitution, and they're not just teaching Constitution trivia, which I think would be less harmful, that the Constitution is just a bunch of numbers on who can do what and who can sign up to be in what position or how many senators there are and on and on. That does enough damage that there isn't anything more to it. But the Constitution Center's view is far worse. They publish these kind of articles on every single part of the Constitution, most of the clauses, all the amendments, a for or an against, basically, position. To take the view that, and they're teaching people that, no, the view of the Constitution is there could be any view. Just pick a side that matches your personal political views, and you'll find a constitutional backing for it. I've got a couple of the juiciest ones that I found. It took about 5 minutes to find some really bad ones. So on the Second Amendment, you can find an article there that says, quote, gun control is as much a part of the Second Amendment as the right to keep and bear arms. That's at constitutioncenter.org. Of course, they add the New Deal and Great Society, and the mark they placed on the shape of American government would not have been possible without the spending clause. Now, mind you, they didn't say it would not have been possible without twisting the spending clause. They just say these great federal programs, they're there because of that. And of course, this one, there are good reasons that existed for the disappearance of the 10th Amendment. So they're actually teaching anti-constitutional positions, things that no founder ever would have agreed with. Even the big government guys back then would be small government people today. So they're at least, I guess they're honest. They run an article that says, now, mind you, every one of these statements, there's an opposing article. But again, that goes back to the view that, okay, well, just wherever, it could be either way. And it is driving this, this mentality that I start with my political philosophy. What do I want to accomplish in political philosophy? And whatever that is, I will get the Constitution to match it and have the federal government do it for me. So it's totally opposite. So if you start out with a foundational principle that the Constitution is fixed, not that it can't be amended, but the legal meaning of a legal document is the exact same thing over time, and then if you want to change it, you amend it. So if you start with that let's say you want the New Deal and the Great Society. You want these types of social programs. Well, under the 10th Amendment, under a fixed legal meaning of the Constitution, almost everything done in those massive programs in the 1930s, 40s, 60s, etc., and expanding through today, almost every one of those federal programs would have been seen as unconstitutional. And so if you wanted to accomplish that and you started with that as your philosophical position, then you would have approached it from a federalist perspective. Here in California, they would have pushed to implement that kind of program on a state-by-state level. And that's how it's supposed to work. That is, if you want to convince people, you lead by example, not by centralized power and force over a giant country. So they have it totally opposite. They're teaching people that the Constitution could just mean whatever anybody wants it to mean. I mean, the idea that gun control is as much a part of the Second Amendment as the right to keep and bear arms, it couldn't be more absurd. And mind you, again, this is at constitutioncenter.org. Now, this flies in the face, and I go through in my article, this flies in the face of basically everything the founders had to say. As James Madison put it in Federalist number 45, the powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined. Those which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite. Thomas Jefferson referred to the 10th Amendment as the foundation of the Constitution. And so here you have constitutioncenter.org saying, well, it was a good thing because the 10th Amendment, especially in federal court, has been absolutely ignored for a long time. I get it through the grapevine that Randy Barnett of Georgetown Law, who is a leading originalist scholar, he's very good on many things. I don't have to agree with him politically on everything to acknowledge that his research can be excellent. He has reportedly told someone that I'm friends with that basically if you go to the federal court, and maybe he said this publicly, if you go to a federal court and you argue the 10th Amendment, the judge is basically going to laugh you out of there. And he was the guy who took the Gonzalez versus Raich case. This is the Northern California 2005 case against marijuana prohibition, where a lady in Northern California grew 6 plants in her backyard, and the federal courts ruled that this was interstate commerce. Alan Mosley, good to see you, man. This is historically inaccurate and economic illiteracy, so much that we can reasonably surmise that these statements were no mistake but intentional misleading of a hopelessly ignorant republic. Ignorant public. Yes, I think so. I think, especially because it's from such a prominent place like the Constitution Center, or if you talk about places like Thomas Jefferson's Monticello or George Washington's Mount Vernon, reducing the ideas of federalism. And whether people like it or not, there's people who think this is stupid or terrible or dangerous. But whether you agree with it or not, the founders clearly took this position. And there's reasons for it. No one's even talking about this, at least in the mainstream. They're not covering it at all. Constitution Center, George Washington, Mount Vernon, they're just reducing talk of the Constitution either to gun control or somehow it has no meaning beyond how long the president serves in office. And that's really what I had to cover today. I think this is all extremely dangerous. The idea that a Constitution Day can be mandated in an unconstitutional federal spending bill is a sick joke at best. And with that, I wanted to leave you guys a little short today, but with the quote of the day that comes from a leading Federalist. This guy was looked at as kind of a big government guy to some degree in Massachusetts, Theophilus Parsons. He was considered one of the best debaters. He's not a very well-known founder, but it was once said to him by an opponent, I think it was Elbridge Gerry. He said, "Hey, if I can have you on my side, I can convince people of anything." It was meant as kind of a dig. But here's one of the big government people in the Massachusetts ratifying convention saying no power was given to Congress to infringe on any one of the natural rights of the people. Totally opposite of how we, the people, have allowed things to play out today. But certainly that's how it was structured to be originally. Now, on Wednesday, we're actually going to cover it's the anniversary, I think it was 222 years ago, 1796, George Washington's farewell address. Mike Meharry is working on an article on this. I know I assigned it to him to get to put together, so hopefully that'll be ready to go. I'm also going to try to cut a video on this a little bit later today. Some important things, and I know a lot of people think about George Washington and his farewell address in regards to foreign policy, warning against entangling alliances, types of things. But there's a little bit more in there that I think is very interesting that I will be sharing with you on Wednesday. I do want to say thank you to Will, to Justin, Alan, Aviator Tom, and everybody else who stopped by, who's watching here live with me right now. Thank you so much for being here, for all your comments. I love reading your viewpoints. If you are lurking and you're watching but not leaving a comment, please don't hesitate. Pop in, share your thoughts. What are your thoughts on Constitution Day? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it absurd that the government mandates it? Because, that's how I look at it. If you disagree with it, what would you like me to cover in the future? Make sure, even if you're not even in the live chat, leave a comment on the bottom. Hit that like button. Smash those likes and subscribe to help us spread the word. And we'll see you again on Wednesday morning, 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. I hope you have a great start to your week. Thank you so much for being here with me today. Have a great day.